something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Well, welcome to Occupy TV. I'm David Ciarlupe, and today I'm joined with John Zerzan. John is a host of Anarchy Radio and a writer of several books. Today I want to talk a lot about how Bloc is involved with the Occupy movement and the anarchists in general, their place in the Occupy movement and what it means to the overall culture. And I also want to learn more about Anarcho-primitivism, which I think is, my understanding, near and dear to the core of your philosophy, right? So welcome to Occupy TV.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So, but let's start. We'd talked a little bit about the Chris Hedges article about the cancer in Occupy. So, what do you say we start there?
Okay.
He said that what action was this after? It was back in what, March?
Early February.
Early February.
I don't think it was apropos of any particular thing, but he was.
It was.
Or was it?
It was the Oakland thing.
Sure.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah, and he had said that the Black Bloc activists in Oakland and across the nation represented a cancer in the Occupy movement. And you have a critique of that philosophy, I assume.
Well, yeah, I'm not the only one. I was in India at the time, and several people sent me the thing, and I was thinking, well, I'm not going to respond. I'm busy here, but I didn't need to. Many other, it's a simple choice. I mean, he's a progressive or a liberal, and I guess his main point, if we want to just flesh that out a little bit, is that it's shocking, it's counterproductive, it turns people off, and worse. I mean, he was really, very, very vociferously opposed to that sort of thing, and yeah, it was. I think I'd heard from various anarchists. This guy Hedges is pretty cool. He's pretty sympathetic to anarchists. A good guy. I hadn't really noticed his work, so I didn't know. But this was a I would say, very vicious attack. The cancer in Occupy. In fact, I think it kind of, in a way, blew up in his face because there were people who were not Black Bloc types who thought, "Wow, that's a little excessive."
I don't consider myself Black Bloc, but I'll have to say, initially I thought of Chris Hedges as somebody who's, who I could admire and respect, and he lost some gloss for me on that. Diversity of tactics is one of the key elements, and I'm not going to say no to anybody who's constructively working towards the same goal I am, and it seemed like he was, yeah.
Although that's a well-known position, though, that and the counter position is you've got to have destructive tactics as well as constructive. You've got to have the negative as well as the positive. You have to have actual resistance. I mean, that's where I'm coming from. I mean, that's why I'm very pro-Black Bloc. In fact, I am the originator, if not the director, of worldwide Black Blocism.
Oh, really?
Well, the media was fond of saying that some years ago. It's complete nonsense.
Back in WTO.
Seattle and all that, But, one interesting thing, and there's so many things that I think this connects to. There was an interview with Hedges just a week or two, something like that, after that printed piece. And he said, and this is kind of a little bit lost maybe, but he said, well, what really, really bugged me, even more than these kids who break windows and so forth, is Anarcho-primitivism. And it's derisive opinion of the left, and he even mentioned my show. So, I mean, but it's also true. Of course, the larger thing was Black Bloc, So.
But now he he felt that anarcho-primitivism was bad because it disagreed with the left. I mean,
he was more threatened by that. He said that. He
Yeah.
said that. That bugs me even more. It's just awful that people like Zerzan trash the left and trash mass society and industrial life. That's what I write about. And
Yeah.
any Tuesday night, that's what you'll hear if you listen to my show.
All right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a little backstory there. But you know, but Black Bloc as a tactic, of course, it represents people, mostly young people, and the reason they dress in black, so as to not be identified by the police, is that if given a chance, they're going to do illegal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't always have that chance.
Right.
And it's not always appropriate. But, you know, then they can't identify you. It's rather obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the question of what constitutes opposition or resistance.
Uh-huh.
And that's obviously a choice. And what does count? What does move things? I mean, I remember, for example, Noam Chomsky talking about the big anti-war demonstrations in 2003 aimed at preventing the second invasion of Iraq. And he said, biggest demonstrations in world history. Mm-hmm. Marvelous stuff. Well, did they prevent the war?
No.
Nope.
They did not.
Nope.
Yeah.
And he's still exulting over those demos, even afterwards.
Uh-huh.
What is wrong with this picture? What's effective stuff? And I would say it's actually true wherever you look. It's true. It was true in terms of Vietnam. I was at those big marches in Berkeley, San Francisco, way back when. You know, that's not what stopped the war. Mm-hmm. I don't think it was. I think it was when the Vietnamese kept fighting and American troops in the field stopped taking the field. Then you've lost the war. Mm-hmm. The major demonstrations stopped. I was at the last big one in Los Angeles. Nixon was in Los Angeles in the fall of '72. I had just moved to LA at the time. It was gigantic. And once again, it was just a kind of a toothless parade deal. Some of us were actually urging some action, and it never happened. Mm-hmm. And then there were 3 years with no demonstrations, because there were been years and years of it. Uh-huh. So these people that say, oh, the demonstrations stopped the war, no, it didn't. Yeah. It never has. It doesn't matter how many people are against it. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, it's what are you going to do about it? You're going to actually do something, or just carry a sign and do what the cops tell you? Stay on the sidewalk, or stay in the street, or whatever. Right. It doesn't cut it.
Uh-huh. Yeah, two things. One quick one was I remember marching in a group, I think in November 17th and 17, and we're marching on the sidewalks, you know, and somebody actually started chanting, "Whose street? Our street." That was one of the most ridiculous moments I felt as an occupier, you know, because it wasn't our street. You know, we were definitely not taking the street. Yeah. And we didn't take it until response to the Oakland thing that Chris Hedges talked about. That was the first time we ever marched in the streets without a permit, was our Oakland Solidarity March. And the second thing that I wanted to spark on was a lot of the times when I'm speaking with people who talk about how to effectively organize and take action, they talk about the millions of people all over the world who rallied just before we went to war in Iraq, and how it was a one-day thing. You know, we got everybody out, everybody expressed their outrage for one day, and then they went back again. And then the war went on as usual. And Chomsky, I guess, is really pretty excited about that still, but for the most part, people who you know, I'm interacting with these days feel like that's an example of what not to do. And you know, they're not, you know, I would say most of those people aren't going to say go break windows. Most of those people are going to say occupy public space and don't give it back is the next step. Mm-hmm. You know, don't just march one day and then go home again and watch yourself on the news, but be there every day. And don't go away, and make it constant in the face of the people who need it to be in their face. Mm-hmm. So you know, I agree that one day thing is not the
Sometimes you, just if I could just throw in one more example from ancient history. I was in Berkeley, I was a student, either 64, 65. There was a nighttime march in Berkeley. And speaking of Oakland, it made me think of that again. The idea was to go south into Oakland, go to the Army base. And when we got to the intersection there, Berkeley-Oakland, giant phalanx of cops across the way. That's a big intersection there. Ashby, I think it is, in Telegraph. Anyway, huge numbers of cops. The march stopped, and everybody, oh, what are we going to do now? This is pretty hairy. And it was nighttime. It was very dramatic. You know, it's 25,000 people estimated. One
How
of
many
the very
cops would
first,
you say?
Oh, I don't know, but they were way over there in row and row. And they weren't so much RoboCop as they are now, but pretty much, you know, shields and clubs and come on over here and it's going to be
ugly,
bad, you know, for you. Anyway, basically it was adjourned. Lots of talk, well, we're going to be back tomorrow and whatever. And of course the stories were basically cooler heads prevailed. You know, nobody got hurt. And the timing of that, this was, I think it was early '65, and right after that, coincidentally or otherwise, U.S. government decided to begin the gigantic ramp-up of war in Vietnam. We finally got up to 500,000, as you know, and 3 million Asians killed? So looking back at it, we should have gone forward. People would have gotten hurt. People might have gotten killed. But maybe the government would have said, wow, I guess we're not going to get a free pass here to just make 10 years of war and destroy all these people in Southeast Asia.
So the alternate ending would have been, you had 25,000 people, they probably had a few hundred cops.
Could have gone through there.
Could have just charged right through.
But we didn't, and you know, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess, basically, but
it seemed like
you look at these things.
It seemed like a good idea to back off or to
Well,
charge.
some of us were kind of revved up, and but you know, we also didn't want to get clubbed and everything. But so I mean, that's the question: what are you demonstrating in a demonstration? You're demonstrating that you're going to, you know, more or less go along with stuff. You know, you're not going to break anything. You're not going to break any rules. You show up in big numbers, but I don't know if that really means anything. It means you're going to go home when you're told.
Right, right, yeah. And you'd said that one of the purposes of the Black Bloc activists is that, you know, they're keeping their faces covered, their identities secret, because they want to be free to break laws. Now, I think there's some delineation there too, because just by getting a crowd to march in the street, you're breaking a law. And you know, you have a big enough crowd, you don't need to cover your face because there's just too many people.
Yeah, they're going to let it happen. It's better than the alternative for them. That happens quite a lot.
Yeah. So I want to define Black Bloc. What are the laws then that a Black Bloc activist is going to want to break?
Well, of course, it's a tactical deal, and so, you know, often there aren't any laws that are broken because it's not an opportunity. In other words, I'm not going to sit here and say or imply what people should do. Often you don't have, in fact, rarely do you have the chance to really do something. I mean, if you're trying to get through the police lines or if you're attacking banks or what have you, you know, I've been in a lot of situations that would just be foolhardy. You'd be busted right away, and so not too much happens. You know, you may be ready for things. And you know, Seattle, you mentioned Seattle, the anti-WTO at the end of '99. Nobody knew what that was going to be like. It could have been just one more fairly boring big demo, and nobody would have remembered it. People did remember it because people stopped those delegates from going in to the convention center, and people smashed up downtown Seattle. And it really, and the reason why 60 Minutes came here to speak to some of us, the Eugene anarchists, by the way, were, because of the riot that happened here 6 months earlier, were already sort of notorious. Oh, if the Eugene anarchists come, they're going to mess everything up and ruin our plans and do crazy stuff. And Yeah, crazy stuff happened, and it wasn't just Eugene anarchists or
No.
whoever it was. But
Well, and that's that. Okay, that's another thing. How often, when something like that is going on, do you think it's truly black bloc, or how often is it agent provocateurs?
I tend to think it's rarely the latter. I could be wrong, but there have been a lot of situations where that claim has been made and found to be false. And I think, I don't know, again, I'm not totally sure about this, but I think the authorities actually don't play that game very much. They don't want more. If you're trying to provoke something and so that leads to more stuff, do they really want to have more stuff? I mean, you know what I mean? I kind of doubt it. And actually, what some of us have seen, and whoever it is can see the same thing, the real problem for black bloc people varies, such as it is, has been, and I think this is changing, but pacifists, like in Seattle, people dressed in yellow, running around, getting in front of the chain store windows or the bank windows or whatever it is, and screaming at people to not break the windows. I mean, they were doing the work. They were doing the work of the cops, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and that actually is a stand I have taken. Is that if I don't feel that my cause is benefited by breaking the windows, I'm not going to go and scream and yell, but I will just as much as I will put myself in the way of some other injustice that I see, I will also want to put myself in the way of that particular action. So I don't know, the people in yellow or whatever. If you have somebody who's going to go break in windows and you get a group of people in between them and the windows, that in itself is a form of activism.
Oh yeah. Sure. I mean, we can debate about what is the better tactics and when and so forth, but.
Well, the thing I was thinking of in Seattle, the number of broken windows wasn't that huge, was it? I mean, there were some Starbucks.
Quite a lot in downtown.
Yeah.
And the cops were very much tied up with all those people ringing the convention center, who were willing to sit there and be sprayed with mace and stuff, and difficult to dislodge them. So it was, in a way, it was kind of a partnership.
Well, that's where I was going to go. That's where I was heading next. Is disrupting the people getting into the WTO. It wasn't the small knot of activists. It was the huge volume of people who had planted themselves and taken the abuse and stopped the smooth flow of that particular event. So And so the reason why I would say, if I saw somebody who's going to go break a window, I would try to stop them from doing that, because I want to get as many people in the streets as possible. And it's tough to do that when people are afraid to get out there, because
well, but again, that was effective because it loused up their meeting. It curtailed the thing, and I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty much always a good idea to break windows, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think, and we don't have to dwell in Seattle, but I think of the Tim Lewis, the local guy, who I think made the best film on the subject, Breaking the Spell, and he meant breaking the conditioning. You can realize that you can go out there and actually do something, not just symbolic. And the other part of it, I just kind of add this on maybe, it's not just the actions, it's what you can command by the actions. And I'm thinking of, for example, connected, I would say, Earth Liberation or Animal Liberation. When they go in Mexico and burn down a McDonald's or whatever it is, burn logging equipment near Moscow or here in the Northwest or whatever, very often then they have the chance to append their communique where they explain why they were driven to take that kind of step. And it's often hard to ignore that. I mean, the media may not want to be publishing their communique, but hey, this This stuff got torched up, and what's that all about? People want to know why they would do that. Just
Yeah.
like they would want to know, like 60 Minutes wanted to know, why would Seattle downtown get smashed up? That's crazy. Well, we can explain it.
Yeah.
You may not agree, but you've got to step it up, or else you're just going to be playing these games forever that never really take on the system.
One of the things, I want to circle back around what you were just saying by analyzing some of the response. Like in May Day, there were some windows broken in Seattle. And we had some people here in Eugene who were outraged by that. And outraged to the point that they were never violent, but they were emotionally violent. It was just huge outpouring of recrimination and such, because people weren't willing to denounce the breaking of windows, which I think is wrong as well. I'm okay with the breaking of windows, but if I'm part of a crowd of 20,000 people, and we have a stated purpose, that we are going to be, marching in solidarity and peace, whatever, and a group of people within that takes advantage of that mass to break windows. I don't know. Are the people who are breaking those windows rebelling against that mass? Or are they rebelling against something greater than that mass? And is there a time when separation of place becomes valid?
Well, I think that's always important to be aware that you may be around people who are quite unwilling to be part of that sort of militancy. And I think it's to the credit of Black Bloc kids who, I don't know of any cases, possibly there are, but I've never heard of any, where people become entrapped or are used by assuming anarchists, Black Bloc types. I think certainly one makes use of that, because then the cops are occupied with keeping track of thousands of people, perhaps.
Right.
Then you go
elsewhere.
Well, if it was just the Black Bloc, you'd be pretty darn vulnerable. Let's face it. That happened in L.A. in 2000 or 2001. In Long Beach, there were a bunch of anarchists. It was just a Black Bloc. There was no demo. It was just them.
Yeah.
And I saw the video. I wasn't there. It was horrible.
They got beat
up. The pigs attacked from all sides, broke bones. They went to prison. You can't do that very wisely. I salute their courage, I guess, but that was suicidal.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
And they've been lost to history. I never heard about it. I maybe heard about it, but it certainly doesn't stick with me.
Right. I don't know how noticed it was in the LA area. I don't know, but yeah, that's not a wise thing to do. So it makes sense and there are people who, perhaps all of us, make the decision at the time, what should I be doing here? What do I do with, here's a target, there's something that's oppressive and I hate. I could walk by and do nothing. I might have the chance to spray paint something on the window or do something. You have to decide as you go along. No Black Bloc people know what's going to happen any more than anyone else.
Yeah, there's not a lot of advanced planning, but desire or willingness, maybe is a better word. Willingness.
Yeah, you're ready to go. If that's where you're at, if you have decided that all the rest of this is kind of shadow boxing and you get sick of it, and you feel like you've got to do something. You have to be smart about it. There are a bunch of ELF kids in prison now, young and full of juice, and got revved up and went out in the night and set something on fire. Well, they're sitting in prison. They didn't think it through. They didn't realize, and who realizes it when you're 20?
Yeah.
You could be sitting there for a way long stretch, for damn sure.
And you're no longer contributing.
Right, and you trusted people you don't know, and that the FBI is doing that big time with all kinds of entrapment and snitches and using young women to get next to these young guys and send them off to, let's go do something. And then, there's all kinds of tactics to round people up and mess with them.
Which actually, when we're talking about agent provocateur, instead of breaking windows, like you look at the NATO thing in Chicago, just before May Day, you have the big event, that hits the headlines. Oh, we just found these guys making Molotov cocktails. We found these guys getting ready to blow up a bridge,
Yeah.
And then you peel that back and you find out those guys would never have even been anywhere near that had it not been for this person. And I think there was a woman involved in the May Day one, I don't recall.
They do that. Lauren Reagan has spoken about that, the funding for that type of thing specifically.
Yeah, for that type of action.
Yeah, using women that's really low.
Well, yeah. I mean, what guy is gonna say no when she's there saying, "Are you man enough to do this?"
There you go. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let's go. Or are you going to just sit here and talk about it forever?
Yeah. Yeah. Which then.
You mentioned May Day. If I could
please
just butt in, I think that's. And who knows? We will find out what this is really about. But on the weekly radio show, right after May Day, I was hearing things that from Occupy in Seattle and Portland, by people who were there, noticing quite a shift. And I wasn't there, so I'm just wondering about this. In terms of being much more supportive of Black Bloc stuff, rather than condemning it. Mm-hmm. And these folks that I know were very surprised, pleasantly surprised to see that. Oh, we got to back up these people instead of that's just stupid. You don't want to, Chris Hedges kind of stuff.
Right.
It's really it was powerful stuff. I mean, we'll find out how far it goes. We'll find out about everything, Occupy and all the rest of it. Yeah. But and prior to that, May Day G8 was going to happen in Chicago. And the Obama government moved it to the military preserve at Camp David. Mm-hmm. And I said on the show, a little shot here at some folks, it wasn't the progressives and the liberals they were afraid of, it was the anarchists that they were afraid of. And that's a victory in itself. I mean, they know that something's going on and more people are maybe with it. Yeah. At my age, I'm not too black oriented anymore, but I mean, I salute their courage and we've got to push on or else... but there are other people. It is probably why, frankly, I don't see so many anarchists involved in Occupy. I know some people who are, and they're hanging in with it in different places. But, if you're to the people that are, they're worried about the banking regs or the tax code, fiddling with that a little. What? Huh? Come on. There are these shootings that happen every day now. It's just become a chronic. These rampage shootings. Mm-hmm. The biosphere is being systematically destroyed. It's catastrophic. The direction is so obvious. There are all of these incredible things, and just the texture of life now. So many millions on drugs of all kinds, and it's just becoming a nightmare. And I don't give a damn about the banking regs changing a little or the tax code. I don't really care. I mean, yeah, they changed it to 21% from 22. So what? I mean, come on, are we serious here? Or are you're just going to end up voting for Obama and you wonder why things keep getting worse? Mm-hmm. It guarantees things are getting worse if that's all your vision is. I mean, we're talking about a different paradigm, a totally different take on everything.
And as the paradigm of the protest changes, do you imagine those who are willing to be more aggressive and pursue Black Bloc, do you imagine that they will take up a larger percentage of overall protesters? I mean, I think it's hard to say no from where we are now. But do you imagine that Black Bloc tactics will become embraced by a significant percentage, or will it still remain a relatively isolated
That's a good question. I hope it's going to spread, and then you've got more chances to do more stuff. I mean, otherwise it's extremely hazardous, whether you're doing something in the night or during the day at a demo or wherever it is. They've ramped up these penalties hugely. I mean, we're in a police state situation in so many ways now. Mm-hmm. Obama is frankly much worse than Bush.
I agree.
It's obvious. I mean, they're not playing, and our side isn't playing either, or I hope it's not playing. It's time to, and if more people join in, then they've really lost. 'Cause what do they have left? I mean, then they're in bad shape.
Yeah.
So it's open for all kinds of, and I would never say that Black Bloc is the only thing to do. There's so many good things to do, so many practical things we need, and so many experimental things to try to figure out.
Are you familiar with Gene Sharp's 198 nonviolent tactics?
I don't know that, no.
I was going to print it up before we...
but
yeah, I mean, it starts... I don't think it ever actually progresses to breaking windows, but it's fairly significant. There's a lot of things that will make people very uncomfortable in that spectrum of 198 actions. It's been a few months since I looked at it, so I can't even remember. Initially I read it once, and then I thought, oh yeah, breaking windows was at number 39, and I looked it over again, and it wasn't there. How about the St. Paul's principles? Have you ever heard about that?
I'm sorry, I don't know that either.
That's okay. I mean, now you wanted to learn about Occupy, and these are the things that we're pulling in. These are the doctrines, I guess, or whatever, that we're starting to form a movement around. So the St. Paul's Principles, I believe, was a group that got together in 2008 to, the opposition to the Republican convention. And they, I guess, as much as there are leaders in any of these situations, got together and said, look, we need some ground rules. First off, don't badmouth each other to the press. Second of all, we embrace a diversity of tactics. If you don't like what somebody's doing, refer back to rule number 1, don't badmouth each other in the press. And then separation of time and place of tactics. So if we've got 20,000 people marching down the street, and our stated goal is a peaceful rally that doesn't involve breaking windows, we don't want you marching along with us chucking bricks out of the crowd. And I think there was a few more. Those are the ones that we all keep chewing on in Occupy. We had the polling action back in Christmas, and that blew up.
Quite a blowback on that, huh?
Yeah. Quite a. I'm not concerned about the blowback within the community. I'm concerned about the blowback within Occupy because people weren't embracing diversity of tactics. There was that kept us relevant for a few weeks. We were in the press. We weren't in the press in a real positive sense, but we were in the press, and also the guy who was right there, making the decisions to kick us out of the park ended up with people in front of his house on Christmas saying we didn't like that. It made sense. Only a small number of people made that choice to do it, and within that group, they paid the penalty. Some people would say that as a group, we paid even more of a penalty. I don't know. So diversity of tactics, and I see Black Bloc fitting into that category. An umbrella of all tactics available.
And some people probably never want to, dress in black and get out there and.
I think most people don't. That's the thing. Yeah.
But you have to go through these things too, though. I would assert that. I mean, people, they say, a common point is that is just so difficult for people to wrap their heads around. You don't go there. That's a loser.
You mean the dressing in black? And
but wherever it is, sometimes you simply have to go through that. I mean, I'm not equating the two, but the abolitionist movement in the 19th century. Where people were risking a lot to, like Thoreau and others, speaking out against slavery. It was hugely unpopular. They were throwing stuff at them and stuff, and we would think, geez, be opposed to slavery is a big, dangerous, controversial thing. Well, it was. And I think people, since they never get access to or almost never, basically in the corporate media and so forth, as to why people would be anarchists or why they would do X or Y, yeah, there's going to be reactions, there's going to be defensiveness and opposition and stuff, but then let's think about it. Let's open it up. And including the people that are, vehemently against it. You can start opening that up and see, and some people will go, I never thought of that before, because they hadn't. I mean, where's the forum or the opportunity to think about it before? And then you move on, hopefully. I mean, who knows, if you may not move on, but you might. You have to push it and see what happens. Because otherwise, by definition, we're stuck with the inertia. Don't ever upset people, well, then don't ever do anything that, how do you get around that? And one other thing, in terms of the St. Paul thing, and we were mentioning Seattle, if you decide on how you're going to define an action or whatever it might be, then, I'll just maybe just comment vis-a-vis Seattle, and I'm not so interested in Seattle, it's an old thing, but there were these spokes council thing, there were these big, what do they call it, I forget, and non-stop meetings and everything, where, and people, I guess like the General Assemblies in Occupy, basically, I suppose, and when some of us got up there, we weren't even allowed to be there. But we also thought, well, what if we went to one of these big assemblies and said, well, we feel important to go out there, and you got a rock in your pocket, and so forth. You got a chain, or we're not interested in sitting there getting sprayed in the face until they run out of tear gas. That's not what we're about. And would have been voted down. Therefore, the question is, so where's the autonomy? So we're not going to subject ourselves to what they want us to do or not do. We're just not.
Especially if you're not invited to the planning session.
Right. And we had a flyer, I can't even remember what it was about, but we couldn't pass it out at the big I think it was called 420 on some 420 address. They wouldn't even let us pass it out. So we kind of laughed and just went our own way. People did what they did, and you can do what you like, but don't tell us what we can't do.
Which is the core of diversity of tactics.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, everything is moving toward a shared goal, but on the other hand, I think there probably is a point when diversity of tactics reaches its limits. I mean, if we got a group that's going to go around and start shooting people in the heads, I mean, there you go. Then we understand there's a limit.
That's not. But again, vis-a-vis Seattle, if the total goal is shutting down WTO, which I totally support, but what about if you have a wider goal of shutting down the whole stinking thing, not just this meeting, but you're trying to come to grips with the enormity of this whole thing from the ground up and why it is becoming so intolerable to all life on this planet.
That strikes me as you were talking about the paradigm shift. You see, I think that if you want to shut down the whole thing, it has to happen in mass. It has to happen in numbers, and then you move beyond the single tactic of how we interact with authority, because that's no longer important once you get to that point. Once you get to the point where you're changing the whole picture, it's not about the oppression of the authority. It's about how we live our lives, and then you have to change, the whole sweeping structure. And the conflicts at WTO and all that is stuff on the margins. Then it's it's a distraction from the overall goal, because you're going to catch attention, and you're still only forcing incremental change even then. Because the people who want to make money are still going to figure out how to make their money, and they're still going to need to be oppressive to the people who are going to cost them money. So ultimately, and this is one of the things I was trying to address in our emails earlier this week, was it's a strategy for the here and now, and it has value in the here and now. Just as marching down the street has value, just as boycotting has value, just as whatever else has value. But ultimately, going to the point of conflict isn't going to create the mass change from the bottom up. It has to happen somewhere else, and it has to happen on a daily basis where we start changing the way we do things.
Yes, it's just a huge project, a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that's, I don't know, it strikes me that this circles around back to the question of numbers. Yeah, there's got to be, if there's going to be a shift in society, it isn't going to be just some handful of people that does that, is, by definition. But but numbers who are willing to do what? Again, are you going to?
How serious are you about your opposition?
Yeah, exactly.
I think is ultimately the question.
People. There were a lot of idealistic people who were nuts for Obama 3.5 years ago, and they probably all feel embarrassed now. But people
and a lot of them joined
change.
Occupy
as
a result.
I'm sure.
Because I don't think Bush could have ever created Occupy, because we were cynical about Bush. I was cynical about Obama, to tell you the truth, but a lot of people weren't. And it was 2-3 years of realizing we'd been sold a bill of goods that ultimately turned into which, for all of its weaknesses, is still probably one of the largest mass movements that we've seen in a good long while, and still has potential to turn into something. I want to touch though on, instead of just talking about Black Bloc, I want to talk about anarchy, anarchists, and Occupy, because that is not something that they haven't meshed yet. And you were talking about that. Have we covered that well enough? But because we talked about the strategy, but what about the philosophy of anarchy and Occupy? I mean, we're just too unserious for anarchists, or?
Well, I suppose a lot of people just see it as very, very issue-oriented or single-issue-oriented. But Occupy varies a lot. I think we all know that.
Yeah.
And you see some things happening in some places and certainly not in other places. I mentioned that some people I know saw, to their lights, they saw in Portland and Seattle a shift in favor of stronger tactics on the part of Occupy, people that were putting out, who were speaking out. But I'm sure that's not everywhere. And yeah, it's tied to everything. It's tied to voting, and I guess there'll be.
We'll talk about voting soon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, I guess the question really is, what is it about Occupy that leaves your anarchic community wanting? What is it about Occupy that just doesn't work for the anarchists?
Well, insofar as it's been, and I don't know how far it's been a liberal affair. There have been places where the liberals or the progressives have worked overtime to suppress anarchist stuff, but maybe I should also say, there's every kind of anarchist. I mean, there's the good anarchists, that Jensen or Hedges would be just fine with, who don't do stuff. And so it's on the level of tactics. It's also on the level of philosophy, I would say. When does the question of what this society is comes up? Not somebody's greedy or the banks are corrupt or... Yeah, that's all true. But you could clean all that up and you'd still have the same system. So we're not interested in reform. I mean, I don't think anarchists, properly speaking, are. That's not the definition of the thing. If you don't want rule, and again, that's, by the way, I think probably some people would just simply chafe over the General Assembly decision-making thing. I mean, it's transparent, it's horizontal, it's got a lot of good features, consensus-oriented, and so forth. But again, what if you want to go do stuff? And some people don't want you to do it. Then you're going to sit through hours of meetings and you're still going to do want to do what you want to do, regardless of the people who don't want to do that. I mean,
Do we have too many meetings?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to answer that.
Well, there
But
have
it's
definitely been times I felt like we've had
Really?
too
Too
many
many
meetings.
meetings?
But from the outside, is that a turnoff to anarchists about Occupy?
I don't know. I don't know. Because I think most people, including anarchists, I believe, are really interested in the dialogue. I sure am. That's my whole thing. That's why I write and speak and travel and so forth, to open up this conversation, which is so blocked at every turn here in this country. I mean, it just simply is. It's really pretty totalitarian here. When you
You mean the country?
Well, the
Or the-
media,
or the-
for example, last week, that fellow, I think his name was also Hedges, at Memorial Day, he said, remember that? He said, I'm a little uncomfortable with calling all of our war dead heroes. Are they automatically heroes because they're dead?
Yeah.
He's probably thinking, what if they were torturers or rapists or killed innocent civilians or urinated on the bodies or burned the Quran? They ain't heroes to me.
Right.
And he was very mildly suggesting, and he had to come on and make a full abject apology for even hinting that these people who invade another country and kill them are not some heroes. I mean, that's the U.S. of A.
Right.
That's just shit. You can't. And Noam Chomsky is always complaining about he doesn't get enough media attention. He's got 50 books out there, but he's right in one way. They're not going to have him on ABC in the morning or these shows.
Well, he's also going to be talking about stuff that's over the heads of the people who are watching the morning show on ABC. They're not ready for that. They want to. I mean, I don't watch them, so I don't know. But I assume they want to know about the cat show down there, or
some celebrity who's back in rehab or something.
How to cook this and that and set your
table.
The
whole thing.
Yeah. So Chomsky is selected out just because he's not gonna address the issues that audience is looking for. They will not be drawn to it.
And yet, to get back to the other subject, I guess, Chomsky's not on my side. Chomsky wants more industrialization. He doesn't care about native people. He wants more, quote, progress. We're on opposite sides. And when I say that in, say, Turkey or wherever, I mean, I do it to try to rev up the conversation. Because they all, we all love Chomsky. Your Chomsky is so great.
I love Chomsky. I'll admit it.
Well, I would concede, in terms of American statecraft, sure, excellent. But otherwise, he's a tepid progressive who is just averse to any real action. He just... Go down the list. He's a tired old lefty who's got nothing to say. He's very weak. He wants a stronger government. He wants a stronger government. He makes that real clear. And yet some people think he's an anarchist. You can, if you want a stronger government, well, fine. Then you're a whatever you are, but you ain't an anarchist. And he hates me personally. I've heard, not that matters in the slightest, but
well, you could take it as a badge of honor.
I guess, but he draws these big crowds with his stale stuff, and he refuses to have any public discussion.
With
absolutely, me. It doesn't have to be me, but any number of people who question what is industrial life. Where is it taking us? You want more of this? Are you insane? That's kind of what I'd say to him, I guess.
Well, saying about Chomsky and Norman Solomon let me down on a few occasions too. I like a lot that he has to say. I like them both, but I have found that in order to fit within the paradigm, the totalitarian media paradigm, they're willing to isolate themselves from the people on the morning TV shows, but they're not willing to isolate themselves to the point where they can be called conspiracy theorists. And that seems to be the cutoff line. You can critique, like Norman Solomon critiques the media, but he'll only critique it so far, so that he's still welcome within the media. And I feel like Chomsky is the same way. There are things that there are critiques you can make before you lose your credibility. And credibility is defined by the media that is creating the wide range of credible notions.
Credible notions, well, is Black Bloc credible? I mean, you know what I mean? I just mentioned my point again, that you can make them come to you. Like, these are, I don't know how far these examples go, but you know, if ELF burns a shopping mall in Mexico, and they have, that's news. So what the heck, why would people do that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, they can explain why.
Right.
They can explain the urgency and why they would take such a risk and so on. You bust through that. You're not waiting for the morning empty, vacuous talk show to call you up.
Well, maybe you get a breaking news that breaks into the morning vacuous talk show.
And you won't get a lot, let's face it. I mean, they're not going to say, oh, why don't you take an hour to explain all your theories or something, you know. But, and it's the same with the Unabomber, and I've never supported sending bombs to people, okay? I mean, when the media's asked me about that, my answer is no, I'm against that. But those people aren't innocent. If you want to hear why, we could have that conversation.
Right.
These little Eichmanns that
that's what I thought of. Who was it who said that? I can't remember his name.
Ward Churchill.
Ward Churchill.
He got it from me.
Oh, did he?
He said, thanks a lot, John. Now, everybody hates me because I stole your little Eichmann, your countless little Eichmanns or whatever it was. He applied it to the 9/11 boardroom people, you know, the people up there plotting war and profit-taking and ecological destruction.
Right, right.
So, but we have so much to tackle. I mean, I don't want to sound glib, like, well, all you got to do is step up. I mean, and that's the thing about Occupy too. I would certainly grant that these are not the easiest times. There was more, you know, around, especially here and well, all over the world, from about '99 through 2001, things were really happening. You might have a riot that you could go to if that's where you're at. But now, to hang in there when not a hell of a lot. But again, May Day, maybe now things are heating up again, and there's action. There will be people for these things, you know, whether it's NATO or G8, big numbers.
Yeah.
And they, of course...
NATO got pretty big numbers, not huge, but...
bigger than one thought.
Yeah.
NATO, NATO, of course, but yeah, it was bigger action than I would have guessed.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they pulled the G8 thing.
Right, right. But well, people were primed and ready to go, and Occupy was going and needed a reason for being, and NATO provided it. That's why I thought NATO got as big as it was, and then and I see that as being a valuable thing for, you know. I realize that it might be too watered down in some respects for you know, people who are tired of waiting, but the thing that Occupy does bring is a pool of willing people to put their bodies on the line. And in Chicago, that was evidence. When you look at the video of those cops swinging their clubs and cracking heads, and people weren't backing away. You know, you look at that and you see them putting their hands out, but that's all, you know. They had a mass of people behind them, but they weren't backing away. They were taking it.
They stood their ground,
yeah.
That's for darn sure.
And so you gotta respect that. And that is happening because of Occupy. It's not happening because of the Tea Party.
Well, you might say it's because of the anarchists. You could reverse that, but I thought when you wrote that to me, I thought, well, I hadn't thought of it that way. Occupy boosting the anarchists. I was, you know, sort of assuming the other way around. You know, here's the party. It's the anarchist kids that are. But I mean, I see what you're saying, very definitely. And you know, another thing on that, this is kind of out of left field, but I would just feel like it's important to some of us, the de-occupy, the decolonize things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as an anarchist, and there's lots of shades of anarchy, the connection with indigenous people is really paramount. And one thing that some of us are pretty upset about, Occupy Oakland rejected that move. And in favor, it's, as some people put it, we want to defend our legacy, the legacy of the left. We're not interested in the legacy of the left. I'm post-left or even anti-left, and I make that pretty plain as to why. And that's the turning point, or a potential turning point, to give us all a different sense of things. Is that the wisdom? How about the wisdom of the indigenous dimension? You know, what we could learn there, and we give lip service to it. But that's a better model to some of us. That's what anarcho-primitivism means in practice, for example. Connections with native folks, say in Arizona or British Columbia or places like that, where there's no basis for trust. Why would they trust us white people?
Right,
but
yeah.
yet you can try to forge something, and in time there have been some nice developments. And to me, that's the future of the anarchy thing, not the old lefty thing.
I remember, you know, early on when we were still feeling really full of ourselves back in October, talking about, yeah, you know, they can push us out of the cities and we can turn to the Indian nations to house us, you know.
People said that?
Well, you know, silly kind of talk like that, you know, at the time. But I don't know, we only have just over a couple minutes left, and you just entered anarcho-primitivism, and we didn't really dive into it very deeply, but do you want to, you know, give you a couple minutes to maybe define that?
Well, thanks, yeah. I think it's...
and also your radio show and your books. Yeah.
Oh, Tuesday night from 7 to 8 here in Eugene, KWVA. It's also streaming, kwvaradio.org, and it's archived on my website, johnzerzan.net. I've been doing that for 10, 11 years.
All right.
And I think I'd probably shoot myself if I didn't have the chance to blow off steam every week and listen to, you know, people call in. And well, I think the anarcho-primitivist thing, it's also called civilization critique, green anarchy, a bunch of different names, but the way I would put it is the future will have to be somehow primitive or there won't be a future. So that's, we just take for granted the whole modernity thing, and it's not working out, you know, so I know, anyway, that could take up a lot of time, but thanks for asking,
Yeah, well, you know, it seems like it's a core of your philosophy, and I didn't want to leave it untouched. But that also, in order for that to happen, requires the mass change, you know, because it's not going to happen today in this world where you know, we're all getting updates on the iPod and stuff such as that.
But I think it could happen. I'm actually pretty hopeful or optimistic. I think this thing is so far gone, and people have to resort to just the most meaningless stuff. I just feel like that's not going to hold up forever.
Right.
People are going to get tired of the technoculture and its false, you know, because it's so negative in so many ways. There's a million studies, you know. How do you count the ways that it's nowhere?
Yeah. Well, we've run out of time to talk about that. But we just left us with some more stuff to talk about in the future, I guess.
Terrific.
So I do hope to have you come back.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Great talking with you.
It's been wonderful, and I was looking forward to this as we were building up with all those emails between us over the course of the week.
Right.
That was good.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. Another week here on Occupy TV. Thanks again to John Zerzan for joining me, and please do tune in again.
Oh, very lively, huh?
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.